What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another daily fantasy slash Draftkings video. Happy New Year, belated Merry Christmas. It's been a while since I've done any content on this channel, and that's because of the holidays, the stress of that. I got a puppy as well, so that's been a task. I was out of town for almost 2 weeks for over a week, I should say. It would have been almost 2 weeks, but had to come back early because, well, we had to come back early because we both contracted COVID while we were out of town. So we had to come back early, and that was like a week long of just not fun. We both got over it. We're still dealing with some residual effects from the whole ordeal. Ultimately, we're fine for the most part, I think. But I'm finally have the strength to get some videos done. But anyway, I wanted to go over just a few free rolls that DraftKings has going on this crazy super wild card weekend where we have extra teams because, we have to give participation trophies to other teams. In other words, teams that have no business being in the playoffs are in the playoffs. Just look at Pittsburgh. So, but then again, though, this is one of those times, like, everyone is going to love this because there's going to be two teams that have no business being in the playoffs, and then they're going to pull off the upset. I'm calling that right now. I guarantee you, I would not be surprised if Pittsburgh beats Kansas City like a 13-10 kind of game, and Oakland or Las Vegas beats Cincinnati in like a 20-14 kind of game. Like, I would not be surprised if something like that happened, or a 20-17 ordeal. Like these types of things happen when the NFL makes certain changes like this, going for like a postseason. It's going to happen, I'm telling you. And if I were to pick upsets, those would be the two that I would target. I guess you could do Philadelphia, Tampa Bay, but I believe more in Tampa Bay being the better team, and to not be taken advantage of in that situation, despite all their injuries. So, as you can tell, I'm not much of a fan of this whole thing. I don't think the playoff structure should be changed. I was not a fan of the additional week of football. Then again, on a sports betting and daily fantasy side of things, it's great because it gives you another week of making more money. So, anyway, and let's clear the air a little bit. I am by no means an expert at DFS. I just know that I haven't really had to put too much money into my account because I don't go crazy and bet like $5-10 contests multiple times. I do the cheaper, like 10, 25, 50 cent, like multi-entries in the very beginning of the season, and then as the season progresses, I start going into more single contests. And no, DraftKings is not the only DFS site I use. I use SuperDraft. I use FanDuel. I did use, I think it's called Underdog for a little bit, but I think they're only on the cell phone. And I only put a little bit of cash in there and did a couple of best ball drafts, which was fun. Best ball was actually a lot of fun. All of that aside, I'm just throwing in my 2 cents here. So I'm just going to actually show you the completed lineups. There's three free rolls. There's one for today, and there's 2 for tomorrow. And there's probably going to be a showdown free roll for Monday night. DraftKings usually always does that. So let's just jump right into it. So there's 2 for Sunday. So on this first one, I went with Dak Prescott at quarterback because let's just face it, at this point, the offense pretty much runs through him. You can ignore the 5 touchdowns against the Eagles. That was great, don't get me wrong, but the Eagles played like hardly anybody on defense. They knew they were already in, so they just kind of scrapped the game plan. And even against Arizona, who are heavy favorites this postseason, he played pretty well. I mean, yards-wise, he didn't do too great, but he did put up 3 touchdowns. The 3 fumbles is what really cost him, obviously. And then, of course, let's not forget the Washington game. But he did have a cold stretch where he was not playing well at all. But I know the offensive line's been banged up. But let's just face it. This offense at this point goes through him, and I think a matchup against the 49ers, who have been a very hot and cold team, if I can remember, this is why I say hot and cold, because when I think of the 49ers, I don't even know what their record was this season. They were 3rd in the NFC West, so, and with the Cardinals and the Rams, I mean, I get it. Record. They were 10-7. They won their last 2 games to get into the playoffs, but they were 10-7. I'm not sold on them. They have great players around them, but I'm not sold on them. So I think Prescott, everybody wants to play Mahomes. Everyone wants to play Brady. There's probably a lot of people taking Jalen Hurts for the upset factor. But I'm landing with Prescott just because Ezekiel Elliott is so hit or miss. Don't get me wrong, on the goal line, down inside the 5, solid player to have, but that's one of those like high risk, high reward kind of things. He could have like 30 or 40 yards on the ground, but if he has like 2 touchdowns, that's a pretty decent outing depending on how much you paid for him at salary. So I went with Prescott. Najee Harris, in my opinion, is like the key to Pittsburgh winning this game against the Chiefs. And he's been just an absolute stud for them the entire year because he's an every down back. He can run and he can catch. He is questionable with an elbow injury, but he practiced fully on Friday, so I'm pretty sure he's going to play and not have any issues. Again, this is one of my spoilers for the weekend. I think Pittsburgh could come in there and win this game. On the opposite side, I ran it back with Derek Gore. Now I know people are probably scratching their heads, but he's the opportunity. The times that I've seen him touch the ball, he's really made something like out of it. And the thing is that CEH is out and Damian Williams is questionable with a toe injury. Now, if anybody's ever had a toe injury, when I played sports, when I had a toe injury, I've had both my big toe, like toenails, come completely off. I've had people in cleats step on my toes. That crap hurts, and when it really does damage to like ligaments inside your toe, I mean, you can ask Ray Lewis during his last Super Bowl run with the Ravens. He had that toe injury that was just so painful that he like could not get any explosion going downhill with his foot. So depending on the severity of that toe injury, of course, I mean, I think he was limited all week. So I think there's going to be an even split between Derek Gore and Damian Williams. And Gore, in my opinion, at 4K, has a little bit more potential. In the playoffs, there's always going to be those low-owned guys who make impact plays because everyone's so focused on the stars. You're focused on Tyreek Hill, focused on Kelsey, focused on even Mahomes scrambling and stuff like that. So, and as you can see, I only have one Kansas City. I'm taking a fairly big risk here because the Kansas City offense is so explosive, but they've really kind of bounced all over the place as far as performance goes. So moving on, Mike Evans, he's really the best. He's undoubtedly the number one receiver. He's the best option that Tom Brady has. And against Philadelphia, I know their pass defense has actually been better this year, I believe. And their run defense on the opposite side hasn't been that great. They've had splash moments where they've played well, but I think Evans, his size advantage and his range on his catch radius is what's going to be the difference maker. say what you want about the Eagles secondary. They don't have superstars in the secondary. They just don't. So Mike Evans should have a good game. I'm expecting him to get at least 6 to 7 targets, which has been his average. And I'm expecting at least 1 touchdown out of him. So if he can get like 70, 80 yards and a touchdown, at 7K, I mean, I think that's okay. If you look at his last game where he had 7 catches, 89 yards, 2 touchdowns, if you took away the 1 touchdown, he ended up with 20 fantasy points. So I think that's a good price point. If he was over 7K, I'd obviously the higher it goes, the more I wane off of it, would look to some of the secondary options. CD Lamb, I know in the game against Philadelphia, he only caught 2 catches for 45 yards. There really wasn't much, and in Arizona he didn't do much, so I'm expecting him to have a breakout game this week, just because it's been eerily quiet for him the last few weeks. The focus has been more on Amari Cooper. I did throw another pit player. I went with Chase Claypool. I had initially, when I first made the lineup, I had both CeeDee Lamb and Amari Cooper in, but I just did not feel comfortable. And I was with Keyshawn Vaughn for the Buccaneers in the flex. And I was like, I really don't like playing both receivers, because it's very rare that you get like 2 starting wide receivers for a team to go off for like 20 plus fantasy points in the same game. I mean, you would need CeeDee Lamb to catch like 6 or 7 catches for like over 100 yards and a touchdown, and have Amari Cooper get like 4 or 5 for like 50 and like a touchdown or 2 or something like that. You know what I mean? Or like 2 touchdowns. So I'm putting my chips on CeeDee Lamb, and then went with Chase Claypool. His target share is there. So I think in a game against Kansas City, this could be, if he catches like a touchdown at 4,700, if he catches a touchdown and has like 3 or 4 grabs, I'm okay with that. As long as everything else falls into place, of course. Like if Gore gets a touchdown, whatever. Gronk, I think this is another big one. I mean, this guy, it's incredible what he's been able to do after being after coming out of retirement. At 6,400, I think that's fine, especially since we're able to fit in all these other players. I think he's going to be a big factor in winning this game. So he may even have more targets, obviously more targets and catches than Mike Evans, but I think Mike Evans might score more than Gronk. But then again, look, Gronk hasn't had a touchdown in 5 weeks, so this could be the game. They both could score for all I know. And since we put in Claypool, we were able to squeeze in George Kittle, the only San Francisco player I have on here. He hasn't had, he's quietly had a decent receiving yards year. He didn't go over, he was 90 yards away from 1,000. He had 6 touchdowns, 71 catches. He's averaging nearly 15 points per game. I think going against Dallas, who's played very well against the pass, all the focus is going to be on Deebo Samuel and stopping the run. So I think George Kittle could have one of those games where he catches, like, even if they lose, he could catch like 9-10 catches and rack up over 100 yards. And then of course I went with the Steelers defense just because it was the cheapest defense on here, and I'm like, okay, well I've already picked it as a spoiler, so I might as well. All right, so let's go ahead, and because we don't want to spend too much time here. Let's go ahead and go into the next one, which was the 5K Supercuts Fantasy Series for Saturday. Or no, not Saturday. Oh, wait, no, it is today. I'm sorry. Yeah, Saturday. Sorry, I'm all confused now. So this is for today. The last one is obviously for tomorrow. So this was, again, I was predicting Las Vegas to be the spoiler in Cincinnati. So I went with Derek Carr. He was the most sensible, affordable option at quarterback. Again, he's another guy who's quietly had a decent year, nearly 5,000 yards, 23 touchdowns. The 14 interceptions does glare at you in the face, but he's played relatively well despite having a very poor running game. So he's pretty much had to put the offense on his back. We'll see how that goes. I did go with Josh Jacobs, though, despite the inconsistency of the ground attack. But Cincinnati's run defense, from what I know, is not that great. So I think it's a good option. Plus, there really aren't that many good running backs outside of like Jacobs and Mixon, who I was able to squeeze in down here in the flex. So, and that's because I put in Ramondre Stevenson. I know Damian Harris is dealing with a hamstring injury, but it looks like he's going to play. But we all know Belichick, he will run like 5 different running backs in the same game, and they'll all get a decent amount of touches. So, going with the cheaper option, Ramondre Stevenson. He's had a great rookie campaign for someone who was virtually a nobody. Scored 5 touchdowns, had over 600 yards, 50 yards a game. I mean, sign me up. I did throw in Diggs just because he's the best receiving option for the Bills. So, I could afford it. I went with Tyler Boyd. He's had a quiet year, but still racked up 828 yards. All the focus was on Higgins and Jamar Chase, but Boyd has been a solid option at $4,600 against the Raiders. I think is a solid pickup. Then I threw in Kendrick Bourne. He again another quietly productive year, 800 yards, 6 touchdowns. He has kind of molded himself into being like the bona fide, he's not bona fide, but quietly molded himself into being the split number 1 receiver. Him and Mac Jones have a pretty good chemistry. So picking between these two games, it's I both defenses are really good, and I would hope that they both stop the run. That's kind of what obviously except for Stevenson. But we'll see. I mean, with the receiving options, nothing really jumps out at you unless you really think the Bengals are going to go out and put up 30, 40 points and everyone's just going to go off. So let's move on. I did go with Darren Waller. Look, I know Darren Waller has had a quiet year. He had that injury that kept him out for a few weeks. And then ever since, the other coach was fired. He's had splashes, but he's only had 2 touchdowns. But let's face it, he's their best pass catcher. I know Hunter Renfrow, he's the best possession catch guy. He's great at catching underneath, making defenders miss, getting yards after catch. But Darren Waller is basically their big play guy that's dependable. I know in the last game against the Chargers, he had some drops. He was dealing with a knee injury, but he's completely healthy now, and it's the playoffs, baby. And at 5,700, and really no other great tight end options outside of Hunter Henry, I felt like this was a great price for him in the wild card. And I honestly believe if the Raiders have any shot at winning, Darren Waller has to have 6-7 catches. He has to score. He has to make a difference. So it's make or break time for him, because this right here is not sustainable. It's not good. It's not acceptable for a player of his caliber after last year. 55 catches for 665 yards is solid for a tight end, but as the league has evolved, the tight end position, this is it's decent. These are decent numbers compared to Kittle or Gronk. You look at what Gronk did this year. At his age, Waller should be able to match that. So that's what we're looking for here. This is the big break right here. If Waller comes out and does not perform, then this lineup is dead, in my opinion. Mixon, obviously if certain other positions don't perform, the lineup is dead. But I really expect everyone else to get a fair share of opportunities. But Waller is one of those ones that will get his fair share, but he has got to make something happen. The last time they played Cincinnati. And because of that, we were able to squeeze in Mixon. Mixon again, I'm pretty sure everybody was talking about him. I don't really follow sports media or anything like that. But I had no idea that Mixon put up 16 rushing touchdowns. That's crazy. That's crazy. And I also had no idea that he had... okay, so he only had 314 receiving yards. But he did catch 42 passes, which is pretty good. So I really like the fact that I was able to squeeze him in. And again, I went with the Raiders defense. I can sub that out and go with like the Bills, I guess, or the Patriots. I you know what? I didn't even realize that I had put the Raiders in here like until just now. Like, and then looking at Joe Mixon, it's like, well, I kind of need Joe Mixon to go off. So like, what defense can I start that I don't care if they smother the opposition? And honestly, it looks like Buffalo. Diggs is going to get his targets no matter what, and he may even score. So we're going to sub that out. So you're getting a live sub. We're going to go with the Patriots defense, and we'll roll with that. So we actually update the entry here. So Patriots defense. Usually when I start out lineups, I usually put the cheapest defense in first and then who I'm starting at quarterback, so I get a accurate depiction of how much I have average remaining salary. All right, last one is the AutoZone Get in the Zone for Sunday. So this is where I switched it up a little bit. I went with Tom Brady. I went with the two top running backs, Harris and Elliott. So I know I talked about how Elliott has had a down year on, like, to his standards, a down, like, not really down, but like, you know, 1,000, like, just barely, because of the extra game, just barely got over 1,000 yards. But he has played two really good games against the Eagles. 17 carries for 95 yards, 2 touchdowns, and 3 catches for 21 yards, 26.6 fantasy points in week 3. And, oh wait, no, they're not playing the Eagles. I don't know why I keep thinking they're playing the Eagles. They're playing the 49ers. Did they even play San Fran this year? No, they didn't play the West at all. Or they played... No, they only played the Cardinals. That was like one of their flex games. Okay. Anyway, I don't know why I keep thinking they were playing the Eagles. But yeah, because of that last game against Philadelphia, he got over and just, you know, barely got over 1,000 yards. He did have 12 touchdowns, but again, inside the red zone, he's only 6,100. That's a really good price for Ezekiel Elliott, and we're really just, it's like touchdown or bust for him. He could end up having a great like game like he did against the Giants or the Panthers or even Philadelphia. So that's what we're hoping for. Harris again, of course, best option there in my opinion. Went with Mike Evans to pair with Tom Brady. I did not have enough for Gronk, so it's kind of like one lineup is going to do better than the other, obviously depending on certain how things go. But that's because we paid up for Tom Brady, and I guess you can call this paying up for the running backs and Mike Evans. But we were able to squeeze CeeDee Lamb in there, and we put in Devontae Smith just for that potential. He's the number one receiver. Tampa Bay's pass defense hasn't been great, though they are getting a bunch of players back from injury just in the nick of time. Sounds kind of familiar to last postseason, where they were completely healthy going into the postseason and just cruised through the playoffs. So now we got Pat Friarmuth. Outside of, I mean, in my opinion, he's had a great year for a rookie tight end. 7 touchdowns, 497 yards, 60 catches. I mean, that's great for a rookie tight end that people weren't expecting like the moon from. It took Eric Ebron going down with injury for him to actually take over, and then we threw Keyshawn Vaughn in there just for shits and giggles. And as you can see, this with the Steelers defense, we do not have a single Kansas City player. So again, we're going heavy on Pittsburgh pulling off the upset and it being a low-scoring game because, let's face it, Pittsburgh's defense has played very well this year. So yeah, those are the lineups. Let me know what you think in the comment section down below, and I will see you all later. Take care.